Okay. All right, this is a regular meeting of the Norwich Planning Commission. We have a quorum of members between Tracy Hall and remote. So let's get started. We have a proposed agenda. If anybody would like to move that, and then we can discuss it. Jeff,
Okay.
second by Ernie. Do we have Vince? Sorry.
We do have Vince, and we also have Bob here as well.
Okay, I see Bob over there. Vince is hiding or something. Okay, he doesn't have his own owl or mushroom or whatever the heck it is. Okay, any discussion on the agenda? All right. All those in favor of the agenda as proposed? All right, unanimous. Great. Let's move. Public comment on items not on the agenda. There's Vince. And Christian, welcome.
Aside from Peggy Allen on Zoom, there is no public in person.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. We have announcements as a placeholder here. Do we have announcements?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff?
Yeah, Jan, I want to just let the commission know that I'm working, my firm is working for Simpson Development to provide boundary surveying for Peggy Allen's project. And I want to disclose that from a professional perspective in case, just for transparency purposes, my comments about what we're talking about tonight were offered relative to zoning changes were offered prior to our engagement with Simpson Development and Peg's team. So I don't see a conflict necessarily. I want to bring this up with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee similarly. But I also want to say to Planning Commission members, if folks think there's a conflict of any sort, you know, let me know. I don't see the basis for recusal, which is up to me, but I actually would recuse if folks felt there was a conflict. So I just want to throw that out there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's always good to be extra transparent. But I think, and I spoke to Jeff about this before, and I agree with the point that we went through various things relating to this project, the definition of an open air market and so forth, and including that in the proposed reg changes prior to any employment by Jeff's firm. So in that sense, it's sort of already done, but thank you for letting us know.
Just also an announcement in a sense. So this afternoon, in conversation with Peggy Allen, I received a piece of correspondence from her requesting an addition to the existing open air market. Because it came in too late to include in the packet, I don't think it's necessarily reasonable or fair to have any substantive discussion about this. But I do want to, bring it to your attention because it was brought to my attention this afternoon. And Peggy has requested that we include the following sentence, and this will be included in our next packet. I just want to put it out there so it's in your mind. The following sentence: allowable accessory and subordinate uses for an open air market include private events, outdoor recreation, wellness activities, and educational programs. So that would be embedded in the existing definition that we have, and that's the extent of what I have to add under this agenda item.
Yeah, I think at this point, like you said, we can't comment substantively on it, having just received it, but let's let people think about that. Um, it'll be on in the packet for next time. We have, as you know, we're trying to step through this kind of with as little revisiting as possible. So we have moved the definition of a lot of those agricultural uses, including open air market, into the category of sort of final review, but we've agreed in principle. So we will have it on the agenda for next meeting to open that one up a little bit and decide whether we want to change the definition of open air market, whether there's some other way to deal with this suggestion, and we'll talk about that next meeting. Okay, very good. Any other announcements? Okay. Just maybe just one quick one, which is the relative to reappointment of our esteemed Mr. Pape, or the process going about that. There, you may have seen in the draft minutes of the select board where it said there are no applicants for the planning commission open position. That was an error in the draft minutes, and I will point that out to them in public comment at the meeting tomorrow. Bob had his application in time, and they were going to leave some of them for a subsequent meeting. But I think between the chair and the minute taker, and the town manager, they got a little confused and put that statement in the minutes. So if you saw that, I will clarify it tomorrow, and then at a subsequent meeting, they will take up Bob's application and theoretically anybody else who put one in.
Yeah, and I think my understanding, the timing is there's a number of open positions that haven't been advertised that will be advertised hopefully this week, including positions on the Affordable Housing Committee, the Historical Preservation Commission, etc. Those applications will be posted open until the 18th. And I think all of these appointments will be taken care of at the 23rd.
I think the
23rd?
23rd was the plan. I
Yeah.
think there's DRB also. I'm not sure, but
I think there's an alternate
apparently
position.
They did I thought they did the alternate to the DRB.
Yeah, and
Oh.
but not Don McCabe, who is going to keep his seat. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just so people are aware of that. All right. Let's hit the meat of the evening, zoning regulation review. You set this up, Stephen, to have the TROC, ORC up front.
Yeah,
So
that's
do you wanna
correct.
Open with that?
Yep. Let me just get this in place here before I share my screen.
And just so people are aware, because we'll sort of merge these as we're talking a little bit, but as it stands right now, as we talked about at the last meeting, this is the first meeting where we're looking at a single unified document of the zoning regulation with the proposed changes in it.
Yeah.
That said, that is with the proposed changes in it other than the TRORC recommended changes. Those are not yet included in the single packet that Stephen put in, that what was in today's packet. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but just so you're aware, right now there are two things in play: the unified document with all the changes we've been talking about and the TRORC recommendations.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying that, Jan. So I'm sure you guys noticed as you're reviewing both the subdivision regulations and the zoning regulations, that a number of these edits were sort of technical and clerical in nature. You know, to the effect of, you know, identifying duplicated language, to the effect of, you know, this is the wrong statute reference, etc. There were some comments that I think would require sort of discussion amongst the members, but a fair number of them are, you know, in my interpretation, just sort of administrative clerical errors. So what I'm hoping to do at the end of this discussion is have the members make a motion to accept the clerical administrative edits from Two Rivers into the working document without further discussion. So that being said, you know, I think we can sort of roll through this a little bit. Let me see the best way to do this. So when I annotated this document, I show comments. Why is it? It should jump to the next comment. Why is it not doing it? Okay. So these, yeah, I put the comments in, but these are taken directly from Two Rivers, and it jumped to the last one. So sorry, you guys.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Right up to the top. Okay.
Now, just for context, these were requested by us from Two Rivers. This was a service they provide.
It was a service they provided. You know, in my early days here, I went to Two Rivers and met with Kevin and Peter and Kyle just to introduce myself. And at that meeting, they offered to review the existing regulations for sort of statutory compliance, etc. And I took them up on that offer, and this is the result of that.
Okay.
So, and you know, stop me if, like, you guys, this is like you already been through this substantively. So there was a number of comments related to sort of the district's standards. The recommendation that we remove agriculture and forestry as uses from this table. They are exempt. We can't regulate them, so it is, you know, essentially misleading in a sense. So that's sort of throughout the district standards. The removal of agricultural as a permitted use. It is a permitted use. Municipalities can't regulate agricultural practices. So where that appears, it's been removed or recommended to be removed. There was a comment that this portion highlighted here in blue is the only district that has this sort of quasi surveyor language describing it. I agree with Two Rivers' interpretation that this isn't necessary. This can be done via a map. And if the goal is to minimize, you know, and sort of modernize this, reduce the word count, reduce the page count, taking something like this out, I think is a good recommendation, being redundant to the map.
Yeah.
You know, feel free, anyone, to chime in whenever you'd like. This, again, same point, removing agriculture and forestry as permitted uses, we can't regulate them. Encroachments necessary to rectify a natural catastrophe for the protection of the public health and safety and welfare. This falls under permitted uses. The point that Two Rivers is making here is this is vague. I don't, you know, I agree as a zoning administrator. I don't have the, you know, I don't have the, you know, the skill or ability or training to determine if an encroachment is necessary. And if somebody was to make the argument that an encroachment was necessary, I don't have the ability to interpret that. Therefore, I think this is, it's fair to me that this could be removed. Or we could sort of break this apart and try to figure out what this really means.
I would do that. I mean, because what I just recently, they felt was asked about something that's kind of like this with it. I think what they mean by encroachment, you know, it sounds, I can't read it that well from here, but
Yeah, encroachment's necessary to rectify a natural catastrophe for the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare.
right, matter of fact, it shouldn't be just natural catastrophes, it could be other things too that are, you know, a down power line can, or something like that.
Right, right.
So, but we should have it somewhere else, because it's not like a permitted, it's not a use, it's really an emergency situation.
Yes.
And you're trying to make.
Are they saying, I mean, permitted use, so yeah. to
So
that
just
point,
some context here.
this is something
within-
that like sounds like a long-term thing, you know, you're building something, you're doing something that counts as a permitted use compared to, you know, cleaning up a tree or a power line.
So this, just for some context, this is within the definition of our shoreline protection overlay district.
Okay,
So this is, you know, this is protecting, you know, streams, riverways, riparian areas. I think you could make the argument that the, you know, sort of slope stabilization project on Hemlock Road is an encroachment necessary to rectify a natural catastrophe. I just, and I agree with Ernie's point that, you know, this is necessary for these documents.
I was gonna say encroachments in a legal sense, encroachment is something bad. You know, and you don't want it, but the
Yeah.
thing is that I mean, if there was another word, maybe another word also might, instead of calling it encroachment, but if you can't think of one, I can't right off the top of my head. Then you gotta just make it clear that this is a temporary thing. It's not permanent.
Okay, and I would, I agree with that. I wonder if, you know, this idea is just in the wrong place.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
well,
Also,
yeah, my question, is this a zoning issue?
yeah, and this kind of, this just defies literal interpretation. I don't know what that means. And my job as a zoning administrator is to literally interpret these things.
Right,
Hey, can I be recognized, Jan?
yeah, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, so to Ernie's point, maybe we put this on a future discussion. And let's see what we can do to administratively address stuff. For me, you know, in 2017, July, 4 miles of impacts that were largely within riparian buffers and so forth. You know, for the FEMA improvements we did for the town, there needs to be a provision that doesn't require review. So let's set this one aside. And
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
I think as we go through these, we have plenty of stuff to go through to
Yeah.
Stephen's point. At this point, we're just triaging. We've already talked about it, so we can blow through it, you know, like agricultural topics or whatever. It's clerical, and we're gonna just bundle those and kind of move them at the end today over, and then substantive topics that we're just gonna identify and flag for follow-up.
Yeah.
That's the goal on this agenda item. Ernie?
So,
Well, no, you finish.
no, go ahead.
All right, I was just gonna say, Jeff just said something that made me realize the nature of this activity is it's really a governmental or a public safety or a public service type of thing.
Mhm.
So it won't hurt to have it in the regulations so that the town knows what it can do without having to consult a lawyer every 5 minutes. I think that helps.
Yeah,
That'll
and
help, and if we can just think of a better word than encroachment, but if we can't, it is.
Okay.
It's like I said, encroachment has a legal actual legal
Mhm.
meaning, and it's negative. But
All right, so let's mark that one as worth more discussion, and we'll keep it on the list.
yep, I've marked it as set aside, so
Okay.
it's there.
Yep.
Again, still in the shoreline protection overlay district. They're saying it's the use of the word permitted is confusing. It should be exempt.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Is allowed.
maybe we should put a glossary in this thing.
Oh, no.
Well,
There's already enough glossaries. There's a glossary for the shoreline protection
well, I mean,
overlay.
it wasn't until I got on the review board that I understood permitted means you get a permit for it, otherwise it's allowed.
Yeah,
So we should make that clear, because exempt means it may be exempt from the regulations, but still doesn't necessarily mean it's allowed, it just means it's exempt from the regulations.
I see your point.
I'm thinking of lawsuits and stuff when I say stuff like that.
We should always be thinking about lawsuits.
Good.
The point that Two Rivers is making here is that significant or natural scenic resources is vague in this particular context. If it's referring to our section on natural resources, which is 3.13, which it probably is, we should just directly refer to section 3.13, and I agree with that.
Yeah. So we have that. The other thing we could do that would help define it, anytime we say scenic resources, we can refer to the scenic resources inventory, which we
Yep.
have and need to update, but we have.
Yeah.
So we should just use that as a concrete resource.
Yeah. So I think, after in our next reading, I will rewrite this to include reference to those two things.
Okay.
The next, and here's the glossary for the essentially it's further on. I've lost it. Hang on. I got to go back, you guys. I'm sorry. Table 2.F1, rural character is a very subjective standard. So 2.8F1, 2.8F. Rural, it was right there the whole time.
Okay.
Again, I take these comments as being valuable in this circumstance. It's better to be specific rather than general, in this context. So I would take on board his, their comments that we specify what rural character contains in this particular context.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to do that?
So I would put that in the triage category of let's talk about it. That one's still active. It's not clerical. It's got a little thought to it.
Got it.
But that's not tonight's task.
Yep. The recommendation here is to be in compliance with these sections of the act, which have changed since this was written. So their recommendation is to strike certain portions of this. We're required, any bylaws have to speak to equal treatment of housing. It's specified in statute what those elements are. And it's Two Rivers reading that these items that have been called out don't apply anymore and should be removed.
So would you agree? I mean, is this a clear cut? You got to do this to be in
Yeah, I would agree.
accordance with statute?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So that counts as clerical in my mind. If we have agreement, it's required.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is to sort of clear up some confusion in references for setbacks for streams and structures from rivers. There's confusing language in other parts of the bylaws. It references table 2.7 or 2.8, and the minimum setbacks are in conflict with one another. So I recommend that we either correct them in this table so it's consistent throughout, or we remove them from this table and only speak to them in table 2.8.
Do you have a preference? I mean, does one place make more sense than the other to have them?
I think if we're talking about setbacks from riparian features, we should be talking about them in the context of the Shoreline Protection District.
Jeff?
Can I be recognized?
Yeah.
I like this table overall. If you're an applicant, you go to the table and say, what are the setbacks? So I can see by district what the setback requirements are. I don't agree with these setbacks at all, and I'd like to get rid of them. Largely. So to the extent they're going to be shown somewhere else, I think they should be shown here and perhaps not somewhere else. Somewhere else could refer to this table. I just want to go to one place as an applicant.
Yeah.
How do I find the friggin' setbacks?
Yeah. So again, I think the larger topic there is the Shoreline Protection Overlay District in total, because it does have two definitions. There's two different setbacks depending on where you are in the Shoreline Protection.
I'd like
overlay.
to spend time on that as a set aside.
Yeah.
I have no problem. If we're going to strike these setbacks, I have no problem striking them from this table. If they're going to exist, I'd like to keep them in the table.
Heard.
Okay. So I mean, it's not. They should absolutely be the same in both in anywhere they are. There shouldn't be but in general, there's no reason to have them in two places. It should be a reference and then one place. And if putting them all in one place in this table is preferred, fine. Put them here and just reference this from the other place.
Yeah, let's do that. I think at that level it's clerical. I'll just make sure that it corresponds.
Yeah.
And is shown in this table.
Can we set this aside?
Well, yeah, that was the second thing. I think we have a requested agenda item relative to Shoreline District and setbacks.
Yeah.
That's in the category of still an active topic and future agenda.
Yes, but for this specific item, I think this is just a cleanup issue.
Where we put, yeah, we're not
talk
talking
about
about changing
the
setbacks right now.
specifics, the larger question.
Yeah.
So this is just bringing some clarity to our fence standards. I do think that we should have a sort of separate section that discusses fences and signs. Fencing, regulation around fencing is a common sort of residential permitting question, and I think it does sort of deserve its own treatment. Usually it's packaged with signs. So the majority of our sort of fencing regulation is under the setbacks section. I think the fence standards needs its own provision. So these are specific use provisions. So the recommendation here is to make fence its own specific use provision and clarify as, you know, Two Rivers has pointed out. Because it is a bit.
Your proposal is to combine that with signs?
Yeah, in its own specific use provision.
Okay. So
So
anybody,
I have a question. So I see fence and wall as conflicting, and maybe we want to throw the word wall in there.
Okay,
So I, you know, there. No, that would be over here, right? Parish Hall's the next.
yeah,
building
it's
over.
the building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. You can go out this door.
Okay, so I've noted that.
Yeah,
So
just because
Okay.
you're gonna see a structure height.
yeah,
In most municipalities, if there's a wall over 4 feet high, whether it's concrete or stone, it falls in a similar category. because of
Yeah.
Structural concerns.
so my recommendation here would be for me to create a treatment for fencing and signs and roll it into the draft.
yep,
Okay,
sounds clerical. Yep.
yeah, all right. Okay, so parking requirements, I think we can actually leave this because we've updated it on our own. But this sort of just reinforces that the changes that we're making to the parking requirements are mandated by Act 181.
Okay. It doesn't change the substance of what we did.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Again, this for section 3.14 driveways, as we'll see in the next document, the inline edits, these one dwelling units to two, or that all that's been done. So, but I do want to talk about section 3.4 DA, also in the specific general provisions here, C, D, A, which is like the shoreline, area that we were looking at before. This is in the, the sort of waiver section where we have a, sort of loosely defined notion of rural character. I think the recommendation from Two Rivers is that we remove rural character as a subjective standard. My recommendation is that we move all of these, that we take a close look at all of the waiver authority here in the Shoreline Protection Act as a separate matter.
So wait, are you confused me on that last statement? All of the waiver conversation, including the shoreline protection, or is that whole thing, is this in shoreline or where this is?
No, this is
separate.
in the general provisions section.
Right, this
and it's
is, you can
providing
make a
waivers
steep, you
for
can make a steep driveway
driveways.
or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. What what Two Rivers is recommending specifically here is that we remove the words rural character because it's very subjective.
So what are you proposing to do about waivers in general?
I would. There's two sections of waivers that are specific to certain items, shoreline and driveways. I would consolidate those waiver authorities under a section that covers waiver authority in general.
Okay, Ernie?
Yeah, I have, to be honest, I have a real problem with the word waiver. And it comes from when I was on the Development Review Board, because it became, when somebody came in for a waiver, it was almost, they were looking for a carte blanche permission to ignore regulations. And so when I see the word waiver, I am very nervous, because we got to make sure that when you say waiver, it means you do it only in the most extreme cases, and it's gotta be, you know, actually a much higher standard than we have now. It was in the past, well, if the person bought the place and has no alternative but to, you know, they can't do something they want. I mean, you know, we had waivers granted for building on literally slopes that were like 25%, you know, because they asked for a waiver, and there was no way around it. They could use the land any other way. Well, you know, actually, that's, you know, the town does have the right to say, you know, you can't do stupid things with your land. You know, you can't build on a really steep slope that no one can get up and stuff like that. So we have to make sure that the word waiver is tightly constrained.
Okay, so I'll get you, Jeff, just a second. I think that to what we say we're doing tonight, clearly waivers is a topic that needs more discussion. But that said, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple edit here is fine for me. I think I agree with Steve with respect to getting waivers on the table in a sort of a catch-all place.
Yes.
I don't agree with Ernie at all about 25% slopes. It's a non-issue for me. So I'd like to get past these false narratives and get to a place where we can understand what land use needs warrant. So I'd like to get waivers on our agenda as soon as possible.
Yeah.
In elective places Steve has described.
Okay, so that's fine as an agenda item.
Okay. Would, you know, it,
So we're still on rural character?
I think, you know, hearing a larger discussion and waiver authority is a part of, you know, the edits that we've come up with.
Yeah.
What I'd recommend in the sort of next month is that I sort of do a waiver treatment for all, because there are waiver authorities sort of peppered throughout our zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations. And I would like to consolidate them as a sort of, you know, single section that deals with them all. So
Okay.
I'd like to prepare that treatment for review in our next the next packet.
Okay,
Yeah,
Jeff?
yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think about, a walkout house, which is like a 40–50% slope. So the notion that we can't allow structures within 25% slopes is absurd to me. It makes no sense in land use provisions. So if Steve can amalgamate all these waiver considerations in one place, that would be fantastic.
Can I just say, I just used 25% because that was a number I randomly picked out of my head.
Well, it's in our regs. 25% is an arbitrarily low slope provision.
Right.
It's a
I
zoning
just mean,
constraint.
what I'm really getting at is when something, when an ordinary person can tell that whatever they want to do is really dumb. And they shouldn't be allowed to do it. They shouldn't be allowed to have a waiver for it. And the thing is that, they were, when I said 25% slope, I have no idea what the slope was, but there was somebody that wanted to build on a big, huge rock that was right beside a road and stuff like that. And the developer review board went along with it. And then when the people started building, then they found out they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Practically. So why do we?
so I think that what we want to do is, for clarity, if you put all the potential waiver topics consolidated, then it's clear, thou shalt follow these rules except for these possible places where there's wiggle room. And that feels kind of logical to me in terms so that it's not this perennial question of, well, can I get a waiver on that? Can I get a waiver on that? It's bracketed, it's limited to what's possible. So yeah, I think that's a good exercise for next meeting.
Okay, great. Moving on. This is just statutory reference and clerical. So moving along. Can you guys see those comments? That might be better.
I can.
Okay, specifically mentions in the rural residential district, but does not mention other districts. This is just some inconsistency in where these uses are allowed.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
that sounds clerical unless there's some.
I think at this point it is clerical, but I haven't double checked to see if we're, you know, explicitly prohibiting mobile parks somewhere else.
Maine would be a great place for mobile home park.
So I think the point here is mobile home parks may be permitted
Anyway,
anywhere, subject to PUD review and the following provisions. So this is, you know, Article 4 here is specific use provisions. How do we handle mobile home parks in general? And I don't think they're just allowable in the rural residential district.
Okay, so that's clarifying the
Yeah.
intent and statute and so forth.
Yep.
Okay,
This is to include emergency shelters, hotels and motels to comply with Act 181 as statute, you know, this statute covers public facilities. Those public facilities in municipal regulation have to include emergency shelters and hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable
so
housing.
that's a statute requirement.
It's a statute requirement. I like this, removing
Knocks off 2 or 3 pages.
almost, you know, 300 words. The point here, even more, I think it's like 400. Telecommunications are facilities that qualify as a public utility, cannot be regulated by municipalities. I think there is some ground that we can regulate. I think we can have provisions for screening. I think we can make statements about setbacks.
So that's very similar to solar to a PV. You can
Yeah.
do a little
Yeah.
bit of screening mitigation and you can do a little bit of setbacks. And
Yeah.
that's about all you can do outside of what the PUC tells you.
Yeah. And Kyle made a good point here about ham radio towers. I've actually dealt a number of times with, you know, residents in municipalities who want to put up a 50-foot ham radio tower. So we can regulate that.
Yeah.
My recommendation for this section is to reduce it to only the things we have authority over.
Yep.
Should we, do you think, define what public utilities are, just so it's in here, so again, people.
Yeah, I think I would make reference to Title 30, Act 248, which creates the authority for Public Utility Commission.
Yeah, because I think it is useful to point out that this is similar to PV projects, you know. If there are things.
I'm saying that is that I'm just thinking, especially as people get more and more litigious, which it never stops. Is if we put why we're saying this stuff so that it doesn't become a constitutional issue, or no one will feel like they're getting it's being a taking or any of that sort of thing. You know, and we just simply make it clear that, for instance, the reason we can't do that is because these are public utilities, and as a municipality, we don't have the power to have anything to say about them. Or whatever little we do have to say about them, we will say about them. But other than that.
Yeah, you just describe the boundaries of, you know, these are zoning and subdivision regs. That's what we're talking about here. and this is what we can do and what we can't do.
I'm just trying to give people fair warning.
I think, you know, we do that sort of throughout, relevant, you
Right.
know, pursuant
Rules,
to,
that's why we do this, but the
Yeah.
point is, I think that a little bit extra explanation isn't gonna hurt us.
Mhm.
Even though it adds
Yeah.
words.
We're
because-
giving you 4 pages. You can do.
yeah, okay, thank you,
Paragraph
thank
of
you,
boundaries.
thank you. 90% discount.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Okay, so now we're sort of, again, getting back to the misapprehension of the, you know, concept of waiver in our bylaws.
So we've got a bucket for that. You want to just put that in the
Yeah.
waiver bucket?
Yeah, I do. Let me just put that in the waiver bucket, and we can move on from that.
Yeah.
This is a recommendation that we separate this table into site plan application requirements and conditional use review application requirements. I think that's a great idea. I would like to do that.
Any thoughts from people?
You're saying basically site plan for a project. And then to the extent there's conditional use review, here's the other layer.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, if that's clear to you and it's a split it up in a sensible way, then I'd put it in the clerical section.
Yeah, it's a table that sort of summarizes stuff. I think it's
Good.
clear. Okay. Review process, and I want you guys to take on board here that this paragraph that's highlighted appears 5 separate times in the, you know, through conditional use review, site plan review, flood hazard review,
Wow.
development envelope review.
Where it's highlighted right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's clerical. I would like to take that up.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an example of what I was talking about.
Now, this is I think this is a set aside topic. This is under development review, conditional use review in particular, where we're calling out the protection of natural resources. Their recommendation is that we use more detailed language. Critical wildlife habitat, for example, is vague. Habitat diversity, vague. And he provides some examples. So I would like to set this aside.
Yeah. That's an agenda.
Okay, thank you. This language, this is duplicated throughout. I'd like to remove it. We are out of compliance with VSA 4464 in terms of these items not being applicable to new housing developments or the housing portions of mixed use developments. I would include that language in this list of standards, or explicitly say this, you know, these standards.
That's a statute required.
Yeah. It's not in compliance with current law.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you go back to flood hazard, Steve, just quickly? I'd like to put that as a set aside as well, just under that.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
part
I
of
have that
the-
under
Sure.
agenda.
Okay, fine.
Item
I'll
line.
let it go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So these are not required for flood hazard. Let's set flood hazard aside for now.
Yeah, I mean, we have an agenda item for today, and if we don't
Yeah.
get to it, it'll be agenda item sitting there
Yeah.
for
These are just updates to,
shoreline and flood hazard.
yeah. Largely duplicated language. Moderate income housing is not in statute. So the recommendation is here is to remove the frame moderate income housing. Even though we define it, it's not defined in statute.
Okay. It's not enabled, I mean, theoretically.
Yeah,
we-
it's not, there's no idea of moderate income housing in statute.
Is there any concepts of what it is? You know, any other? I mean, just because it's not in the statute doesn't mean,
True. What the point that Kyle is making here, I believe, is that the current definition in the bylaw looks very similar to the statutory definition of affordable housing.
oh, okay.
Um,
Well, we
So-
made it up, Steve, so I agree with what you're trying to do.
okay.
But we made it up as a threshold criterion for density bonus.
Yep. Jeff LaBelle has raised his hand.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, can I suggest that you refer this to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee so we can just take a look at the definitions and see if there's any harm
Yep.
being introduced in changing the definition? Seems
Yep.
like an appropriate thing for that subcommittee to take a look at.
Yeah. Anybody have any trouble with that? All we'd ask is that we, it's get things done in a timely fashion so that we can plug it back in and keep moving forward.
Yeah, no, yeah, I would encourage you to move forward with whatever you have like within the next month and just move it. So hopefully we can
Yeah.
get back to you at the next meeting on this.
Okay,
Great. Okay, so done. The definition of an interested person has changed recently. So I would update this to comply with the law. I would actually just take this whole call out. We don't determine who's an interested party. We, in a DRB hearing, we can explain how the law sees an interested person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't make that determination who is and isn't an interested person in the end. So I would just pull this all the way out. I don't think it's necessary.
anybody have a problem with that?
I would just say that, it's just a word, some kind of reference to saying where the law
Yep. Okay.
appeals are, so that people understand they do have appeals and they're not gonna go running around.
Yeah, and
Yes, deal.
we are required to explain the appeal process and include specific references on decisions, all decisions.
Right,
So, and I mean, this explains how it works, and we can direct people to that information. But I would just pull that whole thing out. It's
Okay,
not necessary, considering how much is already there. This is very technical. I don't. I think we should generally just follow, conform with a 15-day notice period. There are some municipal actions like boundary line adjustments only require a 7-day notification. But I don't think we need to specifically carve that out here. I agree with this, removing the,
it sounds
removing-
unnecessarily complicated for
yeah, it is.
somebody can plan for an extra week. It's not gonna hurt them.
Yeah. Then, yeah, so that's it. Then we get to the definitions. Sort of gone to the beginning. I think all of the sort of updates to relevant definitions are captured in our document. I don't think,
Okay.
okay, so
So
thank
what
you.
I have on my list, so we have the clericals, and I think we will ask for a motion in a minute to roll those into our single document. What I have on the list for agenda items, the shoreline protection encroachment one, setbacks, waivers the whole bucket of waivers, and protection of natural resources, specific definitions.
Well,
Those
Floodplain too,
four. Yeah, so we have an agenda item on today's that's flood hazard and shoreline. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We have a bucket for that. So Stephen, did you have anything else that you noted?
No.
All right.
That was it.
So can we get a motion from somebody to roll the clerical?
Jeff, before we do that, can we just also quickly go through the subdivision regulations? I'll
Okay.
try to do it as fast as possible.
Okay,
Because it would be great if we could do that all at the same time.
sure.
So this is a much shorter doc. Okay, so next. Correction to the section 1.3, correction to the reference. We have a strange process for boundary line adjustment, where
Steve, you're showing on the screen a definition of affordable housing. Is that what you're still talking?
no,
Yeah, I don't know if you're refreshing.
I see Article 2 subdivision application
Yeah,
procedure.
I think what happened is you just shared a particular document. You didn't share your screen, so you need to like stop sharing and then reshare the new document that you're looking at.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Yeah,
gonna do that. Share. Great.
Yep,
yeah.
now we can see it.
Now we got subdivision. Boundary line.
So we have a separate section where we discuss the process of boundary line adjustment. What this is simply saying is we don't need to explicitly say any subdivision of land or boundary line adjustment in this section because we deal with it further on.
Okay.
And I do agree with that.
Waiver bucket.
Is it waiver bucket? Okay, so this is around the subdivision process, pre-application meeting. We say that, you know, the applicant can meet with the DRB if they choose. And for a pre-application meeting where it's not warned, the DRB can't take any action. It's not necessary for an applicant to go in front of the DRB to answer pre-application questions. So I would just strike this entirely.
The blue.
I mean, it's a good idea to meet with the zoning administrator, but it's a bad idea for an applicant with no official application to, you know, take a temperature test with the DRB.
Right.
Okay.
Thoughts from anybody? Makes sense.
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with Steve, but you know, if there's a special need for a conceptual review, then we can work that out with the zoning administrator.
You know, if there's anything that I wouldn't want to make an opinion on,
Yeah.
you know, there's always a possibility to review it to, you know, refer it to the DRB.
Mhm. Okay.
Moving on. Oh,
Waiver.
Yeah, waiver bucket.
yeah, waiver, I went backwards, sorry.
Okay.
This is duplicative. It's right. All of this language is right here already. This is just the requirements for what needs to appear on a final plat. We can nuke this. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
Certificates of compliance, we're going to institute that as a sort of administrative policy where, you know, for any building permit, if it's for occupation, it will require a certificate of occupation. A certificate of compliance is, it can be, you know, we're establishing rules for this in another place. So the recommendation is that this be removed. They're saying, what this is saying is, as a condition, the DRB may or may not make a certificate of compliance a condition of approval.
Right. We're just setting up consistent rules elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just sort of pointing out general vague language, similar to what we were seeing in the zoning regulations. I think the recommendation here is that when we're talking about natural resources, where it's, you know, we specify section 3.13, or we list them out and not just say natural resources, physical features on the site.
So that we have that as an agenda item to get some specifics around protection of natural resources. We can use the same language or refer to it.
Yeah, and that sort of falls into that category as well.
Yeah.
That we said waivers, which was just the next section down, does that belong in your waiver bucket?
We have a separate waiver authority section in the subdivision regulations. I mean, if we want to keep them as separate documents, but yeah, generally, yes. Okay. This is just calling out the complexity of our current maximum density calculation. You know, I think there's some validity to criticism for it, but we do not need to discuss this now.
We're not opening that up for round one here. Gotcha.
Yes.
I think that is one of the most brilliant pieces of legislation I've ever seen in my life. And I really would hate to use it.
I agree with you. I think it's very effective. I think it needs some
Might changing it here. but
some
it's-
review.
All right, I don't want to touch this one tonight.
Yeah, as a co-author, let's revisit it down the road. I
Okay.
remember co-authoring.
This is not even in, when we're talking agenda items, the ones we've identified tonight, those are things we need to talk about before we get this round of zoning regs changes out to public hearing.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole other bucket of, if we're silly and we got time on our hands, we'll talk about later.
Okay, this comment is saying where feasible is not good language. I agree with that. We either say use it or don't use it. It's administrative, in my opinion.
Okay,
I'm going to move on. More references,
statutory.
and we're back at the beginning.
Okay,
So
all right.
aside
So
from
can we entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion with these administrative changes in I'm gonna say the whole packet, referring to both subdivision and zoning, subdivision regs and zoning regs.
A second,
Moved and seconded. You got that, Vince?
Yeah, administrative changes to the subdivision regulation and zoning.
As administrative
discussed.
changes proposed from the TRORC.
So we're just covering the
Yes,
regional.
yeah, we're gonna roll into our basically, we're proposing to put those clerical ones from TRORC into our unified document. So we'll go from having two documents to one.
Okay, so we're just moving it into the got it.
Yep.
Yes, our
Okay.
document. Yes.
Any
Okay.
further discussion on that motion? All right, call the question. All those in favor of motion as stated?
I,
All right,
I
okay, unanimous. You got that,
Great.
Steve?
Great, thank you.
you have to take a roll call?
It's unanimous.
Oh, it's
If it's
Yeah.
unanimous, I
no,
don't.
it's unanimous. It doesn't have.
Yeah, the policy as I read it is if there's any question whether it's unanimous, you got a roll call. If it's clearly unanimous, then you don't. and it saves you about 5 minutes in the course of
That
multiple.
you tracked.
So you
Thank you.
have, this is still, okay, so we are gonna go to our inline edits. According to the agenda, we'll go to our inline edits first. And then time allowing, we will wrap back around to some TRORC section about flood hazards and shoreline. But right now, what we're
Yeah.
gonna talk about next is not TRORC stuff. It's our document.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so again, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start with the let's start with the subdivision regulations because that's very straightforward and pretty
Quicker.
simple.
Yep. Yep.
So let me share my screen again.
While Stephen's doing that, I think, you know, the goal here, we'll talk about it a little at the end in terms of process. My hope would be that by the end of our May meeting, we can schedule a public hearing. That we would be far enough along to say that, and then we could do a public hearing as a special meeting. And then in the June meeting, be looking at results of the public hearing, that kind of rough, so that my hope is that between tonight in the next, not quite an hour here, and the May meeting, we are going through this document enough to be ready for a public hearing. So let's see if we can manage that without, obviously, we want to talk about what we need to talk about.
Yeah.
But that's the goal.
Okay, so I just sort of picked this up in the last sort of day or two. And it didn't make it into the document that you guys have. This definition of subdivision, which we've changed, is now out of sync with the proposed definition. I recommend we just delete this entire call out. It's not necessary in this spot. So that would be my recommendation, that we just delete that. Now, moving on to the stuff you guys have seen. So what we're providing here in the subdivision application process is this concept of lot merger. It also changes the definition of lot and subdivision and adds a definition of lot merger. So that all falls under the applicability where, it sort of provides paths through the document. And lot mergers are exempt from subdivision regulations. The applicant would be required to file a form with the department, with us. And, that would allow us to make sure that we're not, that the intent is not, couldn't be construed as some kind of subdivision. That it's just a lot merger.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, Jan, is this our second or third reading of this? Second?
Second, I would call it.
Yeah, so can we just move through unless somebody has questions? Because
Yep, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think we should roll through. I had one question relative, it's not lot merger. I'm actually thinking about the very first meeting that when I came on the commission and I was at Tracy Hall and Cheryl came with a comment from the listers, a request to make sure that there was some kind of closure requirement when something was done. They were doing appraisal and they would have these permits that are sort of half done. I think I asked you, Stephen, a while back, and your answer was there is some time limit that forces closure. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, permits are valid for 2 years. They can be extended by request for an additional 2 years. there is, but there is no sort of inspection for completion, which is why we're introducing the certificate of occupancy, which
Okay.
will effectively close a permit. And once that's recorded with the town, boom, it's done. The listers will know that, they'll see the recording document.
Okay.
So, yeah,
So that's taken care of.
that's taken care of.
All right, to Jeff's point, let's just zip through, and if anybody in their readings has something they want to flag, feel free. Subdivision, as I recall, was not particularly gripping when I went through it. There weren't too many changes.
How can you talk like that?
No, I mean the document was truly exciting. The changes were not that
Yeah,
great.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's essentially it, plus some changes to Article 5 definitions. So
Okay.
in the absence of any additional questions, shall we move on to the other?
Let's do zoning regs.
Okay. Okay, so you guys have seen this document. Just to, I have received some feedback from members about sort of, typos, and I missed the whole affordable housing density bonus portion. I've now added those into the documents. They weren't in the documents that I sent around. But I had repeated some language. I included reference to the Ferrisburg town plan at one point. All of those mistakes have been corrected in this document,
Okay.
just so you know.
Yeah, there was one duplicate thing I definitely saw, and that was the one that you got a note about.
Yeah.
And so that one's covered.
Yeah, and thank you, Vincent, Jeff, LaBelle, for pointing those things out.
Yeah.
So where would you guys like to go?
Well, what do we have? We had been dividing things out. I think we did a very good job last meeting. It was a bit of a flurry at the end of the meeting, but we got everything across the line, the kind of first review line, up to and including those density bonus statements. So I don't think, other than the things we flagged as agenda items just this tonight, including, say, that open air market correspondence, which is next meeting. I do not have notes of remaining policy questions relative to the proposed zoning edits. Does anyone have something lingering that needs to be discussed of the bundle? Okay. So then I think we're in good shape. We can maybe take a look at a couple of those. Let's get through our agenda, but what that means is we should be in good shape for the May meeting to really just nail it down and deal with the outstanding issues and comfortably set up the public hearing. So Stephen, if you don't have any other policy, I'm looking at kind of my bundle where we had all the regs and they were at different places, but I think last meeting we got them through, other than the open air market correspondence we got today and the 4 agenda item statements that we added tonight,
Yeah,
I don't have anything as a policy discussion requirement of the bundle. Would you?
okay. I guess the only thing I would want to raise again, going back to the accessory dwelling unit and the primary accessory and
Okay.
detached notion. So I went back, on the request of the Affordable Housing Committee to sort of look at our history of ADU permitting. And the majority of our permitting for ADUs have been in accessory structures. With the other being within the primary. I would recommend that we capture this notion in our definition of accessory dwelling units. So maybe we could just review what we have for that and just make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay, so you want to pull that up?
Yep.
And just to, because I flagged it when we looked at it, what we still have both. There's a comment of owner occupied because it
Yep.
says owner occupied lot.
Right, in the definition.
And we still have both can't be rented at the same time, or did that come out?
I think that came out.
I think that came out.
Yep.
So just so everybody's clear, the owner occupied is still there. And the rental one is not. And I think part of that was enforceability. I mean, Stephen's going to go figure out who's renting what throughout the town. It's pretty tough to enforce.
Yep.
And plus it was, you can get a 1-year waiver for that, which again is a make work project.
Okay, here we are. So this is all the prior stuff. So I see here that this is, I have in here an older definition. So let me see. The creation of subordinate dwelling units within, attached, or near a primary dwelling, including the conversion of existing detached non-residential building to habitable space. Up to one accessory dwelling within or attached to a primary structure or a pre-existing accessory use structure, and one accessory dwelling within a detached structure may be approved, provided that the following criteria are met. I don't think we disagree with the criteria. I think we've come to consensus about the sizing, though.
Can you help me though with that "and" that's in there where it says primary existing ... and if you can move, so where it says I can have one that's within the primary structure or a pre-existing structure and one in a detached structure may be approved. Is that sound to me like 3 when we were at 2 before?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think this language was the most recent. So
we did. We clearly, the policy statement that this group talked about was you can have 3, meaning duplex with an ADU, not 2 ADUs.
Yes, and I agree with that. And what I would just add is the conversion of a garage space, if you build it, we can even take out pre-existing in this circumstance. Just say you can have it in the primary or an accessory use structure.
Or you can build a new one in your lawn.
Detached structure, yeah.
But it's one. It's the primary, which can be a duplex.
Yep.
and an ADU wherever you want that meets this criteria of basically size and septic and so forth.
Yep. Yes. I mean, I would personally like to argue for but
I
just-
mean that, I'm just saying what we have agreed to up to now
Yeah.
was not an and.
that's correct. I just also wanted to make it clear that accessory use structure was included in the in this definition.
And I think where we left it in terms of policy on that and getting another one was a potential in the future to revisit that if we could somehow tie it to affordability or availability or something like that. We were holding out hope that we would allow it in certain cases with certain restrictions, but we weren't willing to tackle that in round one.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So with that said,
Just one quick question.
yeah, Bob.
The idea, I mean, I see the 1 unit duplex reference in the different zones. Did we decide that multifamily was something for a later time? I think I brought that up before, and I forget how it resolved, or if we did not.
Yeah, it was a future item.
It was a future,
Yeah, I agree with the notion of it, but not for this.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The change that we're reacting to with that is the the law that we can't treat them a duplex and a single family home differently.
Yeah. And that was the simple statute.
Yep.
Okay.
So that, that was all I wanted to
Okay.
take to a little bit.
So that means we're in good shape then, I think, Stephen, for
Yep.
if the goal is by the close of the May meeting to be ready for a hearing,
Yep.
to schedule a hearing.
Yep.
I guess I'm looking at the agenda items, the waiver bucket, clearly you need to do work on anyway before the
Yeah.
next meeting. I guess if we asked also for you to, the other one that looks substantive is protection of definitions of natural resource, specificity on
Mhm.
natural resources and things like that. That would be helpful to have some proposals in
Yeah.
the packet.
Yep.
And then the other one is the encroachment on shoreline one and setbacks. We did the clerical setbacks, put them in the same place. Do we have a substantive setback issue, Jeff, or is that a sort of phase 2 exercise?
Say that again, Jan, setback issue with respect to.
I have setback on the list as a future agenda item, but there are 2 separate buckets for agenda items. There's ones we can deal with in May and be ready to roll, and ones that are bigger topics for future.
I see this as a bigger topic.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll deal with the clerical side of getting setbacks in that table consistent, and that's the place for them. But the policy issues of, are those setbacks right, and how do they relate to shorelines and so forth is a bigger topic.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the point, I'm just going to roll up to the table of contents and look at the specific use provisions. Section 4.06, ponds. We spend an extraordinary amount of time describing the structural elements of ponds that are larger than 24,000 cubic gallons, which is approximately an acre. We've never, we've never permitted anything like that. I would like to revise that section to, just make it more reasonable.
Can I, go ahead,
I'd
Jeff.
like to get rid of this section. The state regulates dams. We don't give a crap about ponds. Trying to be clear.
Yeah, and ponds,
guess-
I mean, ponds are generally good for fire protection in residential areas. You know, I want to make it easy to make ponds.
Yeah, yeah. Can I propose? Yeah, I'd like to propose. So we're doing pretty well here. We've got a couple issues for the May meeting and some prep work to do for those. We've got one more agenda item here that we'd like to talk to. I guess what I'd ask Stephen is, since we're in pretty good shape for the May meeting,
Yeah,
if you want to come to the May meeting with a few, shall we call them riders, for example, we're
Okay.
about to approve this bundle. If
Okay.
you want to come and say, let's delete ponds, or let's, and they're pretty straightforward, then by God, let's give them half an hour in May and see if we can piggyback some sensible things on this batch of changes.
okay, thank you.
Because
It's-
I
ponds.
think there's some low hanging fruit that we haven't talked about yet. That if it's going to be a very low tripwire. If there's any pushback, then we're not going to another month to talk about it. We'll bump it. But
Okay.
if there's some things that you think are clear enough, let's try to get them
Thank you.
in the bucket.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to item 6 then. Shoreline protection overlay, Two Rivers flood hazard. What is that specifically, Stephen or Jeff?
Can I begin? So I think Jeff will speak to this as well. Our shoreline protection overlay is a bit overwrought. It's a bit complex. And sort of to get a different perspective, I reached out to the Conservation Commission and had them review. I've gotten feedback from them. I think it wasn't as sort of conclusive as I had hoped, but I think there's scope to review that at some point going forward. We don't have a really good map of that area. It's a bit risky for me to to sort of permit and work with something that is so vaguely defined. In terms of the flood hazard protection, Kyle reached out to me with an offer to review our current flood hazard regulations to see if they comply with sort of current state law, and has come back with some recommendations, which I haven't put forth to you guys yet. When we review that, I think it makes sense to combine. At present, we have our flood hazard regulations as a sort of standalone section, and we have a flood hazard overlay district. I don't think it makes sense to maintain an overlay district and flood hazard regulations, so I would like to combine those and remove flood hazard as an overlay. And that's just, I just want to, bring that to your attention as sort of background work that I've been working on for future discussion.
Jeff, did you have something to start with?
Yeah, no, I think in general terms, I'm gonna say I agree with Steve. I'd like to, we've already got this as a future agenda item. I can get in the weeds and I won't. I'll just say I generally agree with Steve that we need to revisit these and make sense of them, both and all.
So, but we are putting these in the bucket of next round. These are not.
So I can't foresee a way that we're going to agree this in May.
No
way.
No.
Okay.
I
All
don't
right.
mean Steve and I.
Also no.
Okay. So we just, at this point, we're trying to be crystal clear on what it takes to move forward. So I think
Yep.
we have we have a clear bucket of a couple of homework items for May to get it so that we're ready. Am I right? Help me with the warning timing.
Yeah.
For the hearing. If we have a May 13th meeting, what is it, 15 days to hearing?
Well, there's two components. The first is review by adjoining municipalities and the regional planning commission. They require a 30-day window to provide comments. So May 13th to June 13th.
But that is not sequential with the public hearing, that is in parallel?
Yeah, it can be in parallel. So the second half of the reading period, we can use to, provide the sort of normal warning requirements for a public hearing. I think in this case, I would want to work with you, Jan, with the chair, to come up with a compelling sort of description of the public hearing, rather than just a sort of standard warning.
Yeah.
We'll also need to prepare a report of what we've done.
Right, that's required, a memo summarizing the
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. So I think, sort of looking back, if we do, take a motion to bring this stuff to public hearing, at that point, I'll begin preparing the report. And, as quickly as we can, distribute that report and our amendments to, Sharon, Thetford, Hartford, Two Rivers. And, anticipate a hearing for our June regular meeting.
Use the June regular meeting as the hearing?
We could.
Okay. But I guess what I would propose is that we have a special meeting in there, which is either the hearing or the follow-up on the hearing, because I don't want to wait till July to do the next step. So we can, whether the regular meeting is the hearing, and then a week or two later, we have a special meeting to roll up comments and get it ready because the next step then is submittal to select board, correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can always have a special meeting after the public hearing with not much overhead.
Yeah. So let's look at the goal in May is to turn on you finalizing the report and that getting it into the town and the regional commission's 30-day cycle.
Yep.
And then we will decide on the hearing date. And then we can decide what's a regular and what's a special.
Yeah.
To get so that I'd like to not wait for our July meeting to submit to the select board.
I agree, and depending on the turnout that we get for the public hearing, I think that's feasible, and if necessary, we can have special meetings.
Right. So I guess for this group, just to set the expectation on most likely, at some point later in June, we would have a special meeting to roll up any comments from the public hearing and from neighboring towns and so forth, to get a final bundle proposal to the select board.
Yeah. And I'll work with Miranda, so she's in Brennan, so they're aware that this is upcoming.
Good. Okay.
Christian has his hand up.
All right, sorry, Christian, go
That's
ahead.
okay. Just I don't know how long it's gonna take Steven to get this together to a place where like the group can move it forward, but since it really should be a pretty quick thing, like the other option would be whenever if Steven thinks it's ready in a week or 10 days, we have a short special meeting to move it. Like, No
Right,
reason to wait till May to move it.
before the May 13th.
Yeah, I mean if because it really here everyone's in agreement, so it should be a
Yeah.
quick meeting. We move forward, it goes on to the neighboring towns and everything else. And
Okay, no, that I think that's a good idea. So Stephen, it's we have the homework on the waiver bucket, on some clarity around natural resources, what we're trying to protect and how to define them. And then we will talk and what that encroachment point about shoreline. So if in 2 weeks you can get that stuff ready, then I think that's a good idea. We could do a special meeting before the 13th and just roll this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. I think the waiver authority piece should require some discussion. So at the special meeting, we can discuss the waiver authority and, hopefully come to some consensus. And then at the regular meeting, do the motion to approve.
Okay. So in the interests of staying with Tuesday, otherwise we'll get dizzy or something, or not have the room. What about April 22nd for a special meeting?
Yep.
Okay. So Vince, if you can put that in the draft minutes, and then we can check with Mary, and if anybody else notices something when they look at their calendar. But let's propose that, and then we know what we're going to try to do, and that way we can use the May meeting. It won't be the public hearing meeting, but we'll be in a really good position to keep things moving along.
Okay.
Can I just propose? I'm curious if the group has thoughts. If we're just going to do a shorter meeting, is there any objection to starting at 7 as opposed to 6:30 for that special meeting?
I'm agnostic, but
I like 6:30 personally, just given my health issues. Parent care.
And I like to, because we're doing this hybrid, I have to be here. Somebody has to be here. So I would prefer to do it at 6:30, just so because I don't go home in between.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best. It's 6:30 is always with little kids. It's a super hard
Okay.
time. So
No, I
I'll
get
do
it.
my best on short
okay.
notice.
I get it.
so let's leave it at 6:30, and we may need to wrap back around if there are people that came in 15-20 minutes late. Okay, so that's the proposal. I would I'd take a motion for minutes of March 11.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Any comments or discussion on the minutes of March 11? All right, call the question. Is that everybody in agreement? Approving
Aye.
minutes as written? Unanimous. Any public comment? And I see no public, so unless they're hiding on a camera site there, that's a no. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
second,
Bob. All those in favor, motion to adjourn?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
thank you. Now you can.
Thank you.
We've got an extra 20 minutes that we'll steal back from you on the 22nd. Thank you all. So you need to stop recording, Stephen.
Yep.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop share. Stop recording. Yes.